Well, hey there. So what happens if your fuel filter clogs while you're at sea? Well, your engine stops, and it won't start again. Let me show you a way to guarantee that that'll never, ever happen. Well, hello, we're back aboard Zephyrus, and I'm finally going to connect up the vacuum gauge, which has just been sitting here for a month. Now, this vacuum gauge is going to be in the fuel system. For those who haven't been following along, on a diesel engine, fuel comes out of the tank through a filter system and then to the lift pump, which creates vacuum. So it's sucking fuel through the filter, and then that pumps it up into the injection pump and into the injectors and into the cylinders. Off you go. So the fuel system is in vacuum between the tank and the lift pump, and under pressure between the lift pump and the injection pump and certainly the injectors. Okay, so what happens is, if the filter starts to get clogged, the vacuum will raise between the pump and the filter, because the pump is trying to suck fuel through that filter, and it can't because it's clogged. Therefore, it sucks harder, but the fuel doesn't come through, raising the vacuum. So that's a really good place to put a vacuum gauge, and that'll tell you the state of the cloggage of your filter. That's what this is all about. Now, I didn't invent this. This is pretty common stuff. In fact, Raycor, the #1 maker of marine filters, offer a little vacuum valve, vacuum gauge you can put right in the top of your filter so you can look at it. But of course, it's on the floor, not all that convenient. There's probably a remote version of it as well, but I just opted for matching a vacuum gauge that would go with this system, and I'm going to plumb it into a T between the filter and the pump, and that's what we're doing today. Here are the filters. A pair of Raycors. Now, they are not set up the way normal twin Raycors are, where you can switch from one to the other. Basically what they are is one is on each tank. So here's the inlet from the starboard tank, this one is inlet from the port tank, and they're teed in the outlets, and that line goes down and it's across to the lift pump, which is neat. It effectively gives you the ability to switch filters on the fly if one of them gets clogged and you get into trouble, just by switching tanks, which is actually done further aft. It works pretty well. I think it's a good system. Now, what I have to do is tee off just under this T before this line here, which is the hose over to the lift pump, and then put a small signal line, or in other words, a small vacuum line from here up to the helm to the gauge. Now, I don't know if I've ever mentioned, I hate diesel. I despise diesel. I would love to be in a world where you didn't have to have diesel on a boat, and well, we've talked about that too. So I just hate getting it on myself and or in the bilge, so I'm going to go to some pretty serious measures here to avoid spillage. Okay, so the first step is going to be to drain the filters down below the level of the input-output, so that when I take this fitting apart, it doesn't drain all out and I put a liter of diesel into the bilge. So if you're familiar with draining Raycors, it's basically a valve on the bottom, and you just open her up and let her squirt out. Now, these haven't been opened or cleaned in a while, so I'm curious to see what kind of goop comes out. There'll be some water and some dirt for sure. So I'm just going to have a look at the very first bit that comes out and see what that looks like. Okay, well, if you can see down into there, that's nice clean diesel. There's no water in that one at all. Because there's room and I'm going to end up putting it in these milk bottles anyway, I'm just going to go straight into this milk bottle with this one. Let's see what came out of there. Very careful as I handle this down here. Okay, well, will you look at that? Also, pure diesel. I don't even see, oh yeah, there's a little bit of dirt in the bottom, but no water. That's very, very impressive. I haven't cleaned these filters in quite a while. Okay, so I'm just going to finish draining them. Not very interesting to watch. Right then, here comes the scary part. This hose is new, so that should come off relatively easily. And obviously this is going to leak. And all the oil between here and the top of the hose, and in fact, as I lower the hose to get it off, there'll be about that much diesel that's going to leak out of here now. There's nothing I can do about it, really. I got to catch it, all of it, and what I don't catch will end up on that triple layer of pad down there. So let's get a good wad of paper towel here. God, I hate this. Hate it, hate it, hate it with a vengeance. If I have to cut this hose, I'll be disappointed. because it's new and it should come off. There we go. The thing about barbed fittings is they really bite, so I'm going to have to cut it. Darn it. Okay, so I'm going to cut it just below where the barb is inside. The nice thing about cutting it is that I can put a slit and that'll let most of the oil out, and I can catch it. Filling this paper up pretty quick. Exchange it for some more here. There we go. Okay, so I'll finish the cut, and in an effort to keep this from leaking any more than it has to, I'm going to hold it up high and zip tie it to this fitting here, so that there's no chance this is going to droop down on me when I'm not paying attention and put half a cup of diesel in the bilge. There you go. You stay right there. Ugh, I hate diesel. Now I can take this fitting off. I think it's 3/4. It is. This would be a good use for a shorty wrench if I had one. There we go. Okay, excellent. And here we go, quick trip to the fitting and tubing supply place here in Victoria. Awesome. So this will replace the fitting that went onto the bottom of the filter. And there's the barb for the hose, and here's the quick connect for the nylon line to go to the gauge, the other quick connect and adapter, and onto the gauge. Now I asked them about using this stuff for vacuum. I said it might have to be up to, I don't know, 20 inches of mercury or so vacuum, and he said absolutely no problem. The stuff is certified by DOT for quite a high pressure and vacuum. So the thing is, it's under vacuum, so if it leaks, there won't be a leak of diesel, but if it sucks air, the engine will stop. So we can't have that. So hopefully that's a fact. Let's put this all together with some plumber's tape and get it on. Do you trust this pre-gooped stuff? I don't know. So I've opted out of trusting the, oh my god, this brush is falling apart. I've opted out of trusting the pre-gooped fittings on here, and I'm going to replace it with regular Teflon. Now I actually use yellow gas Teflon tape anywhere I can. On really small fittings it might not be possible. I may have to use regular white. I just like that it's heavier and thicker, and it just seems to be more, I don't know, I just like it better. I don't know why. There you go. Okay, let's get these put together. Get some wrenches on this. There we go. So that's ready to go back in the dash. This is ready to go up onto the fitting. Ugh, not an easy place to get a wrench. And call that done right there. Good. Okay. So let's get this diesel line back on. I can slide it out of there. And first things first, let's get rid of this ridiculous old hardware store garden hose clamp and replace it with a couple of proper marine fuel line clamps. This has still got fuel in it right here, so I'm going to just hold this with a paper towel because it may lose a drop as I get that down and back up onto that barb fitting. Great. And tighten these. So this hose is actually in vacuum, so double clamps might seem a bit extreme, but I just like the idea of it. These are really, really good clamps. And here we go with the vacuum line. I'll open the cabinet here, and we'll run this down, 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 down. Alright, so I fished it all the way down through the bilge and through a bunch of strain relief, and I've quick connected it onto the T at the filter. So now I'll do the same here. Basically, it just got to make sure you're on the inner ferrule there, or whatever you want to call it, inner tube. Line it up, make sure it's lined up, give it a good push. And I tell you, these things, well, they amaze me, to tell you the truth. the fact that that is guaranteed good for pressure and vacuum, pretty impressive. Okay, so I've got to put the light back in and drop this back in. I have lost the clamp for this, so, but they're not uncommon, so I'm going to have to figure one out and reset the clamp for that. But in the meantime, we can just put it back in for the test. Well, before we dare start it, we have to refill the filters because of course we drained the bulk of the oil out of them, and if I start the engine now, it'll suck a heck of a lot of air through. Okay, so if you're not familiar with a Raycor marine filter, it's basically a two-part filter. Well, I don't know if you'd call it two-part really, but there's two major stages of it. There we go. And so the first part is the bowl in the bottom, and the bowl, depending on the model, some have sort of like a little venturi that kind of encourage sediment to swing to the outside and then eventually fall to the bottom. And of course, because oil floats on water, it's a water separator. So in the bottom of that bowl will be dirt and water if it's come through out of your tank. Then after that, the diesel will come back up and through an actual filter element, and that's the filter element here. I'm not going to touch it this time around. You'll have to wait for another time because I'm not changing the filter elements right now because I think they're probably just fine. I'll know in a minute when we see how much vacuum there is in the whole system. But I do need to top the diesel back up, and I do that simply by pouring diesel back into here. And I'm just going to reuse the bulk of the diesel that I took out. Now, this is not ideal either. Let's get lots of paper towel going here around the neck of this. A milk container is ideal for this, with the exception that it doesn't have a handle. If I could find some sort of container that was really good that also had a handle. By the way, I won't be returning this milk container for deposit. I hate diesel. Okay, I'm going to stop there. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm going to top it up with a fuel additive product. Now again, this stuff is called Seafoam. I'm not going to read the thousands of the things it claims to be able to do. It's a fuel additive. Everyone who's ever played with cars or boats or engines of any sort, lawnmowers, tractors, chainsaws, has heard of this stuff. Basically, the idea is you can pour it into the carburetor while the engine's running, and it'll set out a huge white cloud out the exhaust, and it'll clean your valves and guides, and it'll do all kinds of magical things. I'm not sure about actually pouring it into the combustion chamber. I do use it as a fuel treatment for cleaning carbureted jets, not necessarily the jets, but workings, and injectors and injector pumps. I like it in a diesel. It's also an oil, so it burns, so you can put it in 100%. So I keep it around on the boat, and every time I drain down any fuel in the filter, you have to be able to top it back up again, so there's no air up here, and I just use this stuff to top it back up. And then I'll run the engine for a few minutes to let some of it in so that you have a pretty high concentration of it in the injectors and in the injector pump, and let it sit for a couple of days, a week, who knows. Anyway, so I'm going to top up both of these filters with Seafoam. And if you think this product is interesting, I will include a link below in the description for it. I should acknowledge that the links that I've been putting in my descriptions lately are Amazon associate links, which I think means that if you buy something after clicking on it, I'll get a few bucks, but not a concern. Okay, so we'll top up with these. Ooh, this stuff has a particular hospital smell to it. I don't know what it is. I can hear gurgling. That's not a bad thing, but it is a bit disconcerting. There we go. So we're starting to actually get these full. Oh God. One drop of diesel in the ocean makes a slick the size of a football field. Okay, now ideally you want these as full as possible. A tiny little bit of air at the top isn't the end of the world. So I'm going to say that's about as far as I dare go. Have a quick look at the O-ring on this one, and it looks nice. When you buy a new filter, they give you a new O-ring. Okay, that goes on there. Get the T-bars on. They also give you a new gasket for here every time. Okay, theoretically, we are now ready to start the engine, with the exception of turning on the fuel taps, which are in the aft cabin. So let's go do that. Well, I've closed up the sole before I start it, because I want to be able to rush to this window and check for cooling water and to see what the exhaust looks like when I first start it. But it'll be fun to watch this vacuum gauge when I first start it to see what kind of vacuum we get on the fuel line. Ready? Not showing anything just yet. Let's go out and look at what's coming out. Water is a little rusty because it hasn't been run in a while. The exhaust manifold is rusty on the inside. But there's definitely water, so that's good. See some wood falling over here. Okay, so I would have expected to see some vacuum right off the bat. I think it might be worth opening up the floor and having a look at what's going on down here. No leaks, everything seems okay. But no vacuum. Let's rev her up a bit and see what happens. Is it possible that because the filters are in such good shape, there's almost no vacuum? That doesn't seem possible. Let me look into this. Okay then, in an effort to see if this is working at all, I'm going to run aft and shut off the fuel line, the main ball valve at the fuel tanks, and that has got to drive the vacuum up. So we'll see what happens. Okay, so I've shut it off. Either the engine will stop, or that'll come up and the engine will stop. My God, the bloody thing doesn't use much fuel. There we go. Just starting to move. So I guess it's true. There's almost no vacuum normally. So I'm going to go open the valve and that should drop. Now I didn't get to see it, but you guys did. Alright then, well, I'm going to say that it really doesn't take much vacuum to suck the fuel through the rake core. It must be in pretty good shape. That's a good sign. I would have liked, just in terms of having a gauge that's meaningful to look at when you're cruising, it would have been nice if it showed, 2 to 5 inches of mercury of vacuum. That way you could really tell when it was starting to move. But certainly the vacuum came up as soon as I shut the valve off, and the engine wasn't faltering yet, so a clogged filter is obviously going to start to bring that up. So what's going to happen? Obviously just have to wait till we clog the filter and we'll know. Yeah. So now it's just a matter of drawing enough fuel through the Raycor filters and into the injection pump and injectors for the seafoam to do its work. And I think I've done enough of that off the starboard tank, which was on, and so I've just switched tanks and we'll fire it up again for maybe 5 minutes to draw some through from the port tank. Yeah. So here's the problem with snake oil, which of course anything like seafoam is. You put it in and then suddenly you think you've got a rebuilt engine. Like everything just seems to be so much better. You can just tell it's more powerful, it's smoother, there's no smoke, it starts better. Well, the engine always started really well, but it did smoke a fair amount. And this engine isn't anywhere close to warm yet, and it would be still smoking. But there's just next to no smoke, which it must be something else. It couldn't already be cleaned up. It's only been running 10 minutes. It also just seems smoother. It's not loping as much. It's just... it's silky smooth. Damn, I love these little Perkins. Just love them. Gotta get mine going. Okay, that's it for today. Tidy up. So there's the point. If you see the vacuum gauge come up pretty much at all, you know you're starting to get clogged and it's time to either switch filters or change the element in the filter quickly, because it won't be much longer before the engine starves of fuel. Now it's interesting. I bought this gauge with a range up to 30 inches of mercury, and I did that because that's the same range as the genuine Raycor gauges show. But as we've noticed, under normal operating conditions, you can't even detect that there's any vacuum at all. So I think it might actually be nice to have a gauge that had more of a maybe 10 inches of mercury range, and that way you might see some action when it's in just normal operation. But I don't think that's a big concern. Basically, if you see the needle move at all, pay attention. Well, hello there and welcome to the Beer of the Week. This week we have from Category 12 Anomaly, which is a bourbon barrel aged Belgian ale. If that isn't a tongue twister, this is a rather special beverage. It's funny, last week I drank something that I tasted like a cask ale to me, so I thought let's try an actual cask ale and see what I think of that. Category 12, a brewery I don't think of that often, but really splendid stuff. Let's have a look. Oh, lovely and dark, golden and sweet. I love the look of that. How about a little late light on that? That is a very, very dark beverage. I poured too much head on it. Oh well, I don't think I've destroyed it. Cheers, let's see what we think. Whoa, there's a lot going on there. Oh, this is a perfect example of a cask beer, to me anyway. A lot of flavor, not overpowering, not like alcohol, just really rich, really sweet. My God, that's good. Anyway, and that's an awesome opportunity to thank this week's new patron, Casey Jones. Thanks so much for coming aboard. I really appreciate it. Okay, we're going to try something else. We're going to try a survey. Up here in the corner, somewhere will appear a survey, and the survey question is, would you folks like me to do some live streaming? In other words, live broadcasts, maybe once a month or so, where you could sit down and have a fireside chat. I don't really know anything about what I would do, and in fact, I've just started to look at the technology involved, figure out if I have enough bandwidth, things like that. Anyway, if it's something that you'd be interested in, please consider voting above, and if it's something that you would really rather not see, vote no above. Anyway, I'd like to know something else we could play with. Cheers, see you next week.